Merry Christmas Eve! Today is day 4 of my Christmas costume series this year. If you missed the first 3 days, those links are in the description below and the bubble above, so go check those out. I've already made the shirt, skirt, and vest for this costume, and today I'm going to be making the jacket. Starting out, I am sewing the back and the front pieces of the jacket shell together. This is also based off of a pattern by Black Snail Patterns. It's pretty heavily modified, but I'll link the pattern that I modified. It's not hard stuff, it's like removing the whole lower portion of the jacket, cropping it, and things like that. Just sewing those front sections together and ironing them there. And getting those darts sewn in. This is sewn together at the shoulder seams now. And I'm sewing the undercollar pieces together, pinning them onto the jacket pieces around the collar, and stitching them on. Then I've clipped that seam and ironing it all flat. And I've got the side seams sewn up. And we're gonna go move on to the lining pieces, which is pretty much the same process, except for the back has a big old pleat for a little bit of flexibility rather than 2 separate panels to join together. And the facing and the lining are sewn together, the facing being the part that you fold out to form your lapels. So it needs to be the same as the outside fabric if you want it to be a uniform look. Getting those darts into the lining. And the shoulder and side seams on the lining too. And now I am pinning the over collar onto the facing and lining and stitching that on the same way I did the under collar for the outside of the jacket. Now I'm pinning the outside of the jacket and the lining together, right sides together. And I'm stitching them all the way around the edges. Including that front center panel. Then I'm pinning and stitching the armholes together, the lining and the exterior fabric. And I'm pressing down the edges for the whole thing. Now I'm looking at the sleeves. Sewing up that side seam on the sleeves, pressing it flat. And then I'm preparing it for the sleeve hem, so I am putting this piece of linen tape and stitching it into the seam allowance right at the hem allowance line on the sleeve. so that I can then stitch the hem up onto that tape so there's no visible stitching from the outside. So I lost a bunch of footage of my first sleeve, but as you can see with that second sleeve, it's just pleating. This pattern has really easy guides for pleating. Sewing it into the thing, and there's a little poofy shoulder pad bag you stitch in there. And then the way that they wanted me to install the lining, stitch up the sleeve lining on the side seam, and then they wanted you to attach it at the wrist first. They said to pin up the sleeve hem allowance, which I did, but then once I had this upper part of the sleeve, the armscye area pinned, there wasn't enough length in the lining with the full sleeve hem length pinned up at the bottom there, so I did rip those seams out, iron it flat, put a much tinier allowance at the bottom of the sleeve, and restitch that so that it would lie nicely. You don't want your linings shorter than the outside fabric unless you're going for a very Hobo King kind of wrinkly look. Now I've got some buttons I'm adding onto the front of this. These are some self-covered buttons. Obviously this fabric is too thick for the little commercially available self-covered button kits to work with, but I've just gone and stretched the fabric over the guide. They're not functional buttons, so they don't need to have a good shank distance or anything. I just stitched them right on. They're basically just circles of fabric. Now I'm ironing up the bottom hem and the lining. I pulled out the tacking on the bottom of that little pleat in the lining because it just wasn't quite lining up right. And I also didn't want to have the lining pulling funny at the exterior of the jacket, so I just realigned it to make it fit right. Alright, at this point the jacket is basically done, it just needs to be decorated. So I've got some more pleats like those on the skirt. I'm pinning those up over the shoulder and into a V on the back. And I'm just stitching those on by hand, trying not to go through the lining layer, only the fashion fabric. Pretty sure I succeeded. I haven't noticed any. And then a ribbon on top of that. It's not a flexible ribbon at all, so it is tucked and pleated to get it to curve. And then that was all hand stitched down as well. I also added ribbon around the sleeve cuffs. And there it is, the finished jacket. It's completely green when it's worn. Oh, I added a little bow to that back, that's right. But it's got that red lining when you take it off that makes it Christmassy. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you saw and want to see more, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you want to see what I was up to yesterday, which was the vest for this costume, that video's on the screen for you.